Welcome to The Rainbow Connection. This podcast was designed for mothers who are finding their way through life after loss. Whether you're grieving, trying to conceive again, newly pregnant, or holding hope in your heart for what's to come, this space is for you. Each week you'll hear real and tender stories of love, heartbreak, healing, and the babies who continue to shape us. I'm your host, Kristen Mundy, a mother, doula, and a woman who's walked this path too. May these conversations remind you that you are not alone, that your baby is never forgotten, and that hope and grief can live here together. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to take a moment to tell you a little bit about Reclaim, my trauma-informed online birth course that was created for mothers who are pregnant after loss. This course was designed with your unique needs in mind. The fears, the triggers, the desire to feel safe, seen, and supported as you prepare to birth again. Reclaim is inclusive and honors all the ways of bringing your baby into the world. Whether you're planning a cesarean, a home birth, a hospital birth, or something in between, you deserve to feel safe in your body and to fully understand all your options every step of the way. If you're navigating pregnancy after loss and want a birth course that truly understands, you can learn more at thedoulalife.ca/reclaim. And as a special offer to my podcast listeners, use code RECLAIM to get $100 off. Today's podcast guest is Tyla Campbell, a beautiful mama of three, her twin daughters Jhene and Raelyn, who were sadly stillborn at almost 26 weeks, and her rainbow baby boy Lincoln. Today's conversation is raw and tender. Tyla shares with us what it was like to carry and birth her twins, the moment she was told that they no longer had heartbeats, and how she found the courage to try again. We also talk about what it really feels like to be pregnant again after loss, the fear and the love and everything else in between. Tyla and I have known each other online for a while now, so finally getting to sit down and talk face to face and be able to honor her girls in this way felt really, really special. So I'm so grateful she trusted me and this space and all of you with her story. Now, let's hear from Tyla. Hi, Tyla. Welcome to the Rainbow Connection podcast. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so good to see you.
Yeah, of course. So Tyla and I actually have been chatting for a few years now online, and this is our first actual kind of in real life face-to-face conversation. So it's really nice to be able to finally chat. Tyla has two stories to share with us today, both an angel baby story and a rainbow baby story. Before we dive in though, Tyla, would you like to tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself and you and your family?
Yeah, of course. So, as Kristen said, I have two angel babies, and I have my side baby, my rainbow baby. I have a fur baby as well. Her name, ironically enough, is Lila. That was not planned. But yeah, I spend a lot of time right now chasing my 2-year-old around, and singing songs.
Why don't we start about hearing about your twin babies and your angel babies today?
So my angel babies, their names are Jhene and Raelyn. They are my identical twin daughters. And the story of them is sort of incredible because I had just gotten engaged on my 30th birthday, October 2nd. I found out I was pregnant November 5th. And then I found out we're having twins on November 25th. And so there was a lot of excitement in a very short period of time. And to be honest, that pregnancy was difficult. Before I ever found out, like I found out I was pregnant and immediately I was sick. I never know how to pronounce it. Hyper something.
It's severe pregnancy nausea. Is that what you're talking
Yeah.
about? Yes.
And so I had that before I ever, like before the first ultrasound. And my mom and my aunt were like, it might be twins. I was like, please don't say that. And I remember, I had such a different idea of what my pregnancy journey would be. I thought I would be eating everything in sight. I thought I would feel great. And so I'm like, I'm so nauseous, like I couldn't work. Like it was intense. And then when we found out we were having two, I was so overjoyed. And I felt like it was such a blessing. My husband was in shock. I just felt like, wow, I just turned 30. The love of my life just proposed to me. We're gonna have two kids. It really felt like, I had hit the lottery. Um, and to be honest, I knew that a twin pregnancy would be high risk. I didn't know in what capacity. That first appointment, I ended up being referred to McMaster because they're high risk and they deal with multiples. That's what they're known for, apparently. Honestly, up until that anatomy scan, all I cared about was like, are they okay? Because I'm throwing up water. And like that was just like all I was just so nauseous. Um, that it was like are they good? Because I'm not good, and they were very active babies, and I knew what a stillbirth was, unfortunately, because I watched a family member go through it 7 years prior. And so I'm like, okay, why are we like using that term? And then there was honestly a bunch of other stuff that she said that I like went over my head. And one thing to know about me is I'm hard of hearing. I wear hearing aids in both ears. And so at this time, I found out at the end of 2021 that I was pregnant with the twins. So it was the beginning of 2022. So COVID had been around, but we were still wearing masks. At that point, you still had to wear a mask. So it's like hard for me to hear. So my doctor comes and sits down, and immediately she wants me to sit beside her, and she has like a paper out, and I'm obviously being hard of hearing. I'm visual. So she starts going and throwing out all these acronyms. And I'm just like, twin to twin transfusion syndrome, which is when I believe one twin is really high in fluid and one is like not, doesn't have as much fluid. Another acronym was selective intrauterine growth restriction, SIGR, I believe. And that was something that twin B, Raelyn, she had that. And so she's explaining to me that with identical twins, there's one placenta. And in my case, I can never pronounce it, it starts with an M, but there were two sacs. So they weren't in the same sac, but they share the placenta. Raelyn was small. And the reason why she was small is her umbilical cord was attached to the edge of my placenta, and it was attached like so to the edge that if which is not nice to say, but if you weren't a great ultrasound tech, you would think that it wasn't attached. But because I had so many ultrasounds and I knew what was going on, if a tech said it wasn't attached, I was like, it is. You need to bring somebody else in here. It's just like on the edge. So Raylan had a hard time getting the resources that, she needs. She was much smaller than Jhene. But I just remember that first anatomy scan. Like I went in being like, they're gonna tell me they weigh this much, and what the next steps are. And I remember my husband was with me. He was working. My mom was with me, and my mom's a nurse. And honestly, we both left crying. Like I was like, this is way more serious than I ever thought. And I just felt like I don't know anything.
Just so overwhelming. All the words that they're saying, all the statistics, it's just so scary.
It was the statistics, the percentage. I took a picture of the paper. Um, And our generation's interesting because we have so much information at our fingertips. And so the first thing I said to myself was, you're not going to go on Google. Like, just until you can digest this information, we're going to take this one day at a time. We're not going to go on Google because I just, from what they said, I was like, I'm not going to like what I see. And I felt like I had a job to be as positive as possible because I felt like they could feel that. And I remember I would talk to them a lot and just be like, like, I will do whatever is necessary. I just need y'all to hold on. Like, what, like, I remember because they're twins, you have to have ultrasounds to make sure they're both growing. That's the only way you can make sure they're both growing. And there were some appointments where like it was scary. Like even thinking about it right now, where they were like really concerned about Raelyn and how small she was. And because they were identical, if something happened to one, it would more than likely happen to the other. Genetically, there was nothing wrong with either one of them, but the environment just wasn't favorable to them being able to grow. And there was one appointment where I looked at my doctor and I said, "What can I do? Tell me what to do. You guys want to cut me open? Cut me open. There's a medicine I need to take, I'll take it. Like, whatever it is you need me to do, I'll do it. You just need to tell me." Because some of those appointments, it was shocking because they moved so much and because they were so active. It was like hard to hear, you know, that Raylan only grew this much. And, the blood flow from twin to twin sometimes didn't look great. And the one thing that I appreciated, my doctor said, like, there is nothing that you can do. She's like, I want you to understand, like, I've had twins where like there was it was completely different from your situation where they didn't make it as far as you've made it, or they made it even farther, or one twin was 50% bigger. She's like, I just want you to understand, like, it's different, from situation to situation. And that right now, we always took an appointment at appointment, and she always did her due diligence. I remember there was one appointment where the blood flow for the twin to twin, it didn't look great. And my appointments were always on a Friday. And she was like, "You're going to Mount Sinai on Monday. I want a second opinion." I went to Mount Sinai on Monday, got a second opinion. And so then the doctor came in and he looked at me and he said, like, your baby's are active. We know this. And he goes, like, that day, the ultrasound blood flow from twin to twin is hard because it changes like that, right? Like, it just changes so much. And so he said, there were a lot of concerns with Raylan and how small. And he's like, that's not a sick baby. He's like, your babies are healthy babies. And he goes, but I am going to be very honest with you. If something goes wrong, he's like, you will have no idea. And in my head, I was like, yeah, okay. Um, because I was just like, how am I not gonna know? I'm gonna know. The next couple ultrasounds were amazing. We're growing, the blood flow was great. I did the maternity photo shoot on a Sunday. That Friday, I had an ultrasound. And it was the only ultrasound in my entire pregnancy that I went to by myself.
Mm.
And I went in and I said to the tech, they move a lot. So don't be surprised if you have to call someone in. And so she's doing the ultrasound and she was chatty. Like, I gotta give her credit. I did not know something was wrong because she was talking to me. How far along are you? I was 25 weeks and 6 days. And she got the reading. And then I said, I really have to pee. She said, okay, you can go pee. So I go pee, I come back, and she comes in with this man. Again, I'm used to more than one person coming into my ultrasounds, so it doesn't set off a red flag. And she goes, this is, I don't even remember his name. She said, this is Dr. So and so. I said, okay. And so she shows him the ultrasound. She goes, this is twin A, this is twin B. And she goes, I'm going to step aside. I said, okay. And he sits down and he crosses his legs and he takes a big breath. And he goes, there's no easy way to say this. I'm just going to come out and say it.
Mm.
I said, okay. And he goes, neither one of them have a heartbeat. And I said, no, that can't be right. They had woken me up. So that appointment was like 9:30 a.m. They had woken me up the night before. I had to get up, walk around, drink water. I paced my apartment until they calmed down. I went back to bed. And there was something about the way he said it the second time that it registered. And he said, I understand everything that you're saying right now to me. I'm telling neither one of them have a heartbeat. And it was just like, and I remember feeling like the wind got knocked out of me and somebody was punching me in the stomach at the same time. Like, I just remember discombobulated. I felt discombobulated.
Mhm.
I was just like, both? Like I went from everything being okay to both of them. And I remember he was apologizing, and I was like, it's not your fault. And I'm trying to stand up and I'm trying to hold the bed because I'm like, do not pass out. Like, do not pass out. And I just remember being like, I have to call my husband. I call him and he picks up right away and he goes, what's wrong? And I was like, I need you to sit down. And he's like, just tell me, just tell me. And I said, I need you. He was teaching that day. And I was like, I need you to sit down. And I just said, neither one of them have a heart. And for him, it did not register. He just said, I'll be at the hospital. And he just left work. Even though I watched a family member go through the stillbirth experience, it's very different when it's your turn. And so they're like, the social worker is going to meet you upstairs. And I'm like, I got to walk through the waiting room. I remember saying I didn't want to scare the other moms. And so I wait, I fix myself up. I have my purse, and everyone, all the techs are looking at me. And I was like, just put your head down and get to the elevator. I get to the elevator, and of course, there's a mom in there with her newborn baby talking to her newborn baby. So I get upstairs, and they're frantic. So I'm like, okay, they told them obviously that I'm coming. And so all I said was, I'm Tyla. And she said, okay, sweetie, just 1 second. And so I walk into the private room and I had called another family member to come because I knew it was going to take my husband a while to get to me. So I'm sitting in the private room by myself and nurse, I always get emotional when I talk about this because I was by myself. Like no one had hugged me, and there was a nurse that I would see frequently. And Lisa came in and she said, I'm sorry you're in here by yourself. She gave me a hug. I didn't realize how badly I needed that hug. Like, I just got told the worst news I've ever been told in my life. And she said, today's been a weird day. And so she's like, I'm sorry you're in here by yourself. I was like, no, it's okay. I said, someone's coming. I really appreciate you coming in here. And so the timing of the social worker and a family member coming in was like it was pretty close together. And I remember the social worker, one thing I was not prepared for was like how quickly you have to make decisions.
Oh, yeah.
And you're discombobulated. I still have to tell people. I still, like, I'm thinking, truthfully, what I was thinking was I was terrified to give birth. Because of how far along I was like, I'm about to do something I've never done, but I'm not going to get to come home with it.
Mm.
Like, I just remember in my mind being like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? Like, how, like, physically, mentally, emotionally. And the social worker's talking to me about getting an autopsy done and cremation versus burial. And I'm just like, man, I'm trying to figure out, like, how I'm going to make it to tomorrow. And you're talking to me about an autopsy? Like,
Just like the most traumatic decisions that you never in a million years ever thought that you would have to decide. And you're not even here. It's like you're on a different planet.
there's so much of that time period I don't remember. It is an out of body experience. Like, and then it just like again, you just don't think about having to make these choices. And I remember when my doctor walked in, she like had tears and she was like, I'm in shock. She's like, I looked at the scan, I've studied it. She's like, there's nothing I can see in the scan. And she said, like, this happened recently. I said, it had to have. I could feel them moving. Like, I didn't have any blood or fluid or cramping or I remember when my husband finally got there, you could tell he had been running and he ran into the room and he out of breath and he said, both of them. I just like, I'm trying to hug him and like it's not computing for him. And like I can only imagine for him, like it did not feel real. He went into I have to take care of Tyler. And like I have to all these other really uncomfortable things such as whether we're gonna have a funeral service or not, whether we're gonna bury or cremate, whether we're gonna have an autopsy or not. Like he tried to help manage that as much as possible. And I remember my doctor saying, I want to do this today. And they were like, we don't have the staff because you go into a private room and, staff that are with you the whole time. So call in the morning. I remember thinking like, how am I supposed to leave this hospital? How am I supposed to drive home? How am I supposed to knowing like these babies aren't coming home with me? And so I went back to my dad's house. Both my parents lived in Burlington. I went back to my dad's house and my parents are separated. My mom came over, Rashad, dad, and stepmom came over. And there's this like, I'm sure you can relate to this. People treat you different and people look at you differently. And there was this like I don't think people took pity on me. I think people were genuinely heartbroken for me, but I couldn't process what was happening. I was still carrying. And it was so hard for me to receive other people's emotions, if that makes sense. I just was like, it sounds hard, but it was like, you're devastated. Like, I gotta go into labor tomorrow, and I gotta push, and I gotta do. Like, I told myself the entire pregnancy, you can have how hard it was. It'll be worth it because they'll come home with you and you start your next chapter together. And now I have to put my body through something to go home empty-handed.
You're fighting from the very beginning for these babies.
And it was so hard. It was hard to go to bed that night. It was hard to wake up. It was hard to go to the hospital. I was just afraid of everything. Like, I was afraid of everything. And when I went to the hospital, one thing that my husband and I, like, we talk about every now and then, we don't talk about frequently because it was traumatic because I was so dehydrated. It was really hard to get an IV in. And so throughout my pregnancy, I spent a lot of time in the ER getting hydration. But when you give birth, I remember they could not get the IV in. So the first nurse, I think it's supposed to be like 3 pokes and then like you get someone else. So it was 3 pokes. She went and told her boss, they told her to keep trying. She did it 2 more times. She's like, I'm not doing that. They brought in an anesthesiologist and he's just poking everywhere. And my husband stops him at one point and goes, what's going on? Because at this point now I'm above 10 pokes. And every time, right, they would get it in and then if it blows, it feels like a cigarette burn. So my arms are on fire. And, my husband looks at him and he's like, you have one more poke and you need to go and get somebody else. So couldn't get it in. And somebody comes in saying, we're going to put the IV in your foot. And I said, I don't consent. You're not putting it in my foot. And, at this point, even in that time, I had been nice, Tyla. I threw the smile on my face. I was being very nice to these people. You guys are not putting it in my foot. That I don't even know how I'm supposed to go to the bathroom. Like, no. So my nurse comes back from her lunch break And she's like, they're not putting it in your foot. It's like, I know. I said to them, she's like, that doesn't make any sense. She's like, they're not doing that. They get the senior anesthesiologist to come in. No one told her what the situation was. So she comes in and she goes, hey guys, what are we having? And I'm like, so my husband's like, um, like, let you know the situation. And she's like, I am so sorry. So like, she's not happy that no one told her. And then she sees my arm and she looks at the nurse and she goes, what's going on in here? I can tell she's not happy. So she's like taking a look at my arms, looking, and she finally gets it in my hand. And when she gets it in, I break down. And my husband's holding me and he's like, you are doing such a good job. I'm so proud of you. I like honestly was crying harder than when they told me the girls didn't have a heartbeat. Like I am just like hysterical. And this anesthesiologist and ripped the entire floor. It was so to this day, I never had a fear of needles. I hate needles. If I get blood work done, I look the other way. Like I hate needles. It literally, that's the same as like when I get nauseous, it just takes me back there. But yeah, that was very traumatic. And then I was in labor for 24 hours. And at the 24-hour mark, I was only like 3 centimeters dilated. My husband and I are like, because in that 24 hours, I feel like my brain was trying to me from the trauma. So then, like, in that 24-hour period, it was like maybe they got it wrong. Maybe it's not both of them. Maybe there would be a miracle. And then the logical side of my brain's like, Tyler, there's no monitor set up. And so that 24 hours was help of mentally having to constantly prepare myself. And at the 24-hour mark, they were like, okay, we're going to break your water. Again, I'm terrified. So when they broke my water, and then how I was induced was like, they placed like a medicine, like, inside my vagina, like every 4 hours. I hated it. And so they like doubled the dose and broke my water. And the real labor entered the chat. And I was like, I remember my husband being like, what can I do? And I was like, I don't know, you need to do something. Like I was in so much pain. Tractions were back to back to back. And then when I realized like, okay, catch your breath and like try to control your breathing, it'll be okay. Mentally, I don't even know if I could put into words what that was like because it was the beginning of the end where I was like, wow, I'm gonna like meet them, but like have to say goodbye. And from when they broke my water and doubled the dose, I was pushing for Jhene. It wasn't even 30 minutes later. And I know epidural. So they were like, it's time to start pushing. And I remember looking over at my husband, and there was no time for me to console him because he had a look of excitement on his face. And I was like, oh my God, he thinks they got it wrong. And I'm just like, I don't have any time to tell him what's about to happen. And I just remember being like, this is so messed up. And um, I pushed Jhene out, and I don't use the word majestic ever. She was majestic. She was so beautiful. And the room was so silent. And they put her on my chest, and I couldn't stop kissing her. It was so beautiful. I just was like, I couldn't believe it. And I just kept telling her how much I loved her. She was a long girl. She was very long. I remember that. She already had all kinds of hair. And then, they basically were like, when you're ready, you know, you can push for Raelyn. And it's interesting. I've never spoken to a twin mom about this because Janae was like painful. Like I felt the ring of fire, all of that. And then with Raylan, it was such a different experience. I didn't feel anything. She came right there. I don't know if it's because I had just pushed Janae and it's a weird thing that makes me smile. It was like how they were in the room. Janae was feisty and fiery, and she was always trying to get to Raylan, and Raylan was just trying to like in the ultrasound, like you can see she was just trying to fight for a little bit of space. She was always trying to chill out, and Janae was like, no. And so it's just interesting how like Janae was spicy coming out, and Raylan was not. It was so calm and cool and collected. And then I had both of them on my chest, and I was just hysterical. It just felt cruel. Like, how are you gonna give me these like beautiful babies, and I don't get to spend a lifetime with them? It felt really cruel. It was just like they weren't crying, and everyone's silent because like, what do you say? There's nothing that any of you can say to me, you know. And then unfortunately, what happened after, again, this is something I don't talk to a lot of people about. My placenta wouldn't come out. So they were like trying to get my placenta out, and it was like very uncomfortable and very not fun and very traumatic. And then it got to a point where they're like, we have and like we don't want you to lose your uterus. And I remember being like, uh, correct. I don't want to lose my uterus either. And so then they like because I didn't have an epidural, I remember a surgical nurse was like, "Oh, we're just gonna freeze you." And my husband's like, "She didn't have an epidural." And the nurse was like, "What?" She's like, "Okay, we'll just put you out." And then like I went and they took out my placenta. Um and like a lot of that, I'm so out of it. There's a lot going on. I remember I woke up and my husband was like holding both of them and he was watching Space Jam. Yeah. And then we go up to the room and we spent my rule of thumb is I wanted one night with them, so we spent a night with them. And then comes the day that like honestly, when you have to leave them is harder than giving birth, in my opinion.
Yeah. Giving birth is giving birth is the easy part.
It it is. Like it when I look back, it was when, you know, my husband so I wear hearing aids. I wasn't wearing them. Like when we got up to the room and we were spending time with them, I didn't have my hearing aids in because I was like in and out of sleep. My husband can hear, so he can hear the other families and he can hear the other babies. I can't. I remember waking up and my husband is I've never seen him look like this. And he was like, they're cold. I'm like, well, yeah, honey. Like, and he was like, I can't. He didn't say he couldn't be here much longer. He just like he was struggling. And I remember in my head I was like, as much as I don't want to leave them, like, we are gonna leave them today and like but I at that time didn't realize he was hearing so much that I couldn't hear. And so we have a book that we read to them and I remember it was the NCAA March Madness and so we had the women's basketball game on. And so the social worker comes in because we're like, how do we do this next step? And she's like, you can pick a time. And we picked a time, and the nurse and the social worker come in, and they're both in the bassinet. And the nurse went to go take, and I wouldn't let go of the bassinet. How do you expect me to let go? Like, how? Everything was fine. Everything was going so well. And just like that, you guys want to take them, like, how am I supposed to breathe? How am I supposed to, I wouldn't let go. Like, how, like, you guys want me to let go? Like, and I remember my husband holding my shoulders. I don't even remember what he said, to be honest. But I just had my head down and I let go. And I just fell to the ground. How do you, like, even right now, thinking about it, I'm just like, I don't even know how I did that. And I guess, another choice. I don't know. I hate that. I hate when people say, like, you're so strong. Like, is that strength or is that survival? Like, what other option did I have? I had to let go. I had to leave with a memory box. I had to make all of these decisions that I didn't want to make. I gave birth to them on April 3rd, which was a Sunday. The following Sunday was their baby shower, and it was virtual. So people had sent all their baby stuff to our apartment. So now it's like we have all this stuff in our apartment. And all this, like, it was awful. It was so awful. You are so right. Giving birth was the easy part because it was like everything else that followed. It like, the room that is now my son's room, like, the door had to be closed for weeks. And then sometimes I would go in there in the middle of the night and bawl my eyes out, and then I would come out. Yeah, and like my husband managed everything with the funeral home. And I said before we chose for them to be cremated. And so, my husband did include me in like helping pick the urn. And we chose an urn that had two birds and the memorial space for the girls in the urn is here. And there's two birds on them. And my son is obsessed with birds. Just put that together. Because I wanted to say goodbye to them before they were cremated. It was a closed casket. When we showed up at the funeral home, it was me, my husband, and a woman who she's basically my sister. It was the three of us. There was some miscommunication, and the girls weren't at this funeral. And I'm just like angry.
Yeah.
My husband's just like, please, because I'm obviously angry at the world, but I'm just like, I'm not understanding. Like, where are they? And then they were in the same city. They were at another funeral home. And so Rashad's like, they just need an hour to bring them over here and set up the room and give us a moment. So we had to go eat lunch. And it was the most awkward lunch ever. Like, we're going to eat lunch while they bring over my daughters who are not living so I can say goodbye to them. Like, it was so, I remember my sister just like, she was so great. She was so great during that time and to this day because she just like held space for our feelings and however we felt. She was like, yeah, this is messed up. You know what I mean? And then so everything was set up. We go back to the funeral home, and before we walk in, I have to sign the stillbirth death certificate. And seeing those two pieces of paper, I was just like, I'm gonna keep going back. Giving birth was the easy part. Like, I'm like, this is actually torture. Like, this is actually torture.
It's so weird too, like when you have to do things like eat after that. It's like, how am I eating? How do people eat? Like, I remember that being for me like a really weird thing. Like, how can I eat when my baby's not here? Like, how is the world still moving forward?
100%. So unfair, and it doesn't make any type of sense. And they did do a good job setting up the room, but we chose for them to be in the same casket, and the casket was closed. And I remember walking up to the casket, and then I just fell to my knees. Yeah, I remember thinking casket shouldn't be that small. And I just remember constantly holding my stomach. I think I couldn't compute that, like, they were with me all the time. And now they're over there. And, like, it felt like someone cut off my arm and my leg. Like, how am I supposed to move forward?
I think our body kind of like has its own grief to go through and its own processing, and it takes a while to even really like catch up to like, what just happened because it's just not meant to happen, right?
Absolutely. And then when it was time to leave the funeral home, there's all these things that, like, right, you have to do. So, okay, I gave birth. Okay. And then we have all this stuff in our apartment from the baby shower. And I'm like, I don't want to look at it. I don't want to get rid of it, but I don't want to look at it. Okay, so we're going to move all this stuff out of the apartment. We're going to put this in storage, wherever. Okay, I want to say goodbye to them before they're cremated. Okay, okay, now we have to pick up the urn. And I think because there was just like, there was these list of things, and I've been doing it, I'm a mess. I'm having a hard time getting out of bed. My body's sore. I'm covered in bruises from when they poked me with the IV. I've lost so much weight. I don't want to eat. I'm having nosebleeds. Like, when we went to the funeral home to pick up that urn, I just like, it made no sense, but I was like mad at the funeral person for like putting it on the table. Again, I just put my head down and cried. And then we went home, and my husband had them in his lap on the way home and cried the whole way home, listened to Luther Vandross. And I feel like when we got home and after that piece, I almost felt like, what now? Like I'm expected to what? Breathe to I can't move on. I'll never move on. And I just remember like, yeah, and I just like people just didn't understand. I remember somebody asking me, I was still in a diaper, and somebody asked me like, "Oh, are you back at work?" I was like, "No, I'm back at work. I don't care about insurance." Like, like I just remember thinking like, and I do think it's the society and the culture of like the hustle and bustle. I'm just like, I'm not. I'm just like, actually, I'm still in a diaper. I don't know. People say stuff sometimes, and I'm just like,
They just don't get it.
yeah, they don't. Um, and yeah, it's like having my own side child doesn't absolve everything that's happened over here. Yeah, I mean, that's the story of Jhene and Raelyn.
Thank you for sharing them with us. I know that that story is going to affect a lot of people. A lot of women are going to be seen in that because there's a lot of things that you touched on that, people don't even think about when it comes to losing our babies and the things that lost moms have to deal with that are just, I mean, obviously losing your baby in itself is the most traumatic thing you're ever going to go through, but the trauma doesn't just stop with that news, right? It's really a journey and it doesn't even stop when you leave the hospital. So just really appreciate you opening that part of your heart and sharing your stories with us. And yeah, that's so honored to hear it.
While we take a quick break, I wanted to introduce you to The Haven, my signature 12-week support program for mothers who are pregnant again after miscarriage, stillbirth, or infant loss. The Haven isn't just a course. It's a trauma-informed, community-centered program that includes weekly live workshops, expert guest speakers, and ongoing dual support from me, your dedicated pregnancy after loss doula, anytime you need it. You'll also receive guided journaling prompts, full access to my 13-module pregnancy after loss birth course, Reclaim, and a warm, intimate community of other PAL mothers, a place where you can be real, be held, and be reminded that you are not alone in this. Enrollment is now open at thedoulalife.ca/the/haven, with our next fall cohort reopening this September. You do not have to go through your pregnancy after loss alone, and inside the Haven, you won't. As a special offer to my podcast listeners, use code RAINBOW to get $100 off enrollment. Thank you so much for sharing your girls with us, Tyla. I know it's really emotional to go back there. I'd be really curious to hear how did the days look, following their loss, and how did that, I know a lot of us come, like, after our loss, we feel different things. Some of us want to get pregnant right away. Some of us, are needing time to heal. What did that look like for you and your husband? Were you guys feeling like you wanted to get pregnant right away, or why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
For sure. In terms of what that looked like, immediately after, I couldn't even fathom it. And I was like, I do not know if I can put my body to this again.
Mm-hmm.
I really struggled with the fact of like my body couldn't protect either one of them. That's something that I'm still working through to this day. And so it was like, how do I go into this experience that is a long experience, knowing there's no guarantee? My husband was very much, whatever I wanted, like he was in alignment with their doctor of like, do you think your body, like the 3 month minimum, like, do you think that's a good idea? Just again, the vomiting and all of that was wild. But the turning point, I thought when I went through the grief that I had skipped the anger phase, like, oh yeah, that didn't touch me. And then, so like I said, I had the girls April 3rd. So then Mother's Day is the following month.
Mm.
And that is when anger showed her face. And I was like angry in a way that my skin was on fire. And it almost unhealthy for sure. It almost was like, I don't care how many times it takes. I don't care what I have to do. I will have a child.
Mm-hmm.
Which, when I look back, I'm like, it was me trying to like have control over something you can't have control over. Like in the moment it was anger, but really inside, like I felt uncontrollable. It was Mother's Day, and I was just like, this is brutal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm angry. I don't like anyone. I also understood before I ever went through anything like this. I heard stories, right? Women who had recurrent losses. And when you hear the stories, you think like, at what point do you stop? Like, and I always in my head, in a very arrogant way, would be like, I would stop at this number, at this loss, or until I went through what I went through with the twins. It's like, there is no magic number.
Mm-hmm.
I just remember that Mother's Day being like, I'll do this a million times. I don't care. Like, I was so angry. Um, and I remember my husband saying, one, I think you need to talk to other people who have gone through what you've gone through and like move through those emotions. And he was right, because I also was gonna need support, if and I was lucky enough when it happened to me, I was gonna need support. So that's what it looked like. And we had an honest conversation of where even still to this day we have honest conversations of like, I can't promise you I'm going to want multiple children the way I did before. I can't promise you that I'm gonna want to go through the, I always say it wasn't arrogant, but with the twins, because it was two, I was like, you right? Like, it's probably it. And the pregnancy was so hard that I was like, I don't personally feel like I'll need to do this again. And then I remember being like, I don't know if you experienced this, but like I regretted saying that. I
Mm.
regretted assuming that they were going to come home. And a friend of mine was like, no, that's actually how you're supposed to think. You're supposed to believe your baby's gonna come home, and your baby should have come home with you. But that's what it looked like. It was I had reached that angry stage in grief, and then we had a conversation, and then honestly, I started getting help and working through the pain, the shock, the anger, and then I was like, the 3 month mark, let's try. I realized that I don't think I actually thought about, okay, if the test is positive, like you might not like with the twins, for instance, I fell to the floor when I found out I was pregnant. We weren't trying. It was so unexpected. Fell to the floor, cried. Oh my goodness. And then when I found out it was my Earthside child, I smiled and I was excited. Um, it just felt different. Like I just was, and then I felt robbed of that. Even with the twins, as scary as those conversations were, bliss. Even with the vomiting and them go, they didn't like popsicles, water, they didn't like anything. But bliss. Just like bliss. And I could picture everything. And when I found out I was pregnant with my son, I couldn't picture anything. I said my husband had proposed, and then we found out we were pregnant with the twins. I could see the twins on my wedding day. Like down to the shoes, I could see it all. And with my son, even before I knew he was a boy, the whole nine, my brain, I realized that was trauma. Like my brain could not even fathom. I think it was protecting itself in a way. And so that pregnancy, when I look back, I wanted a baby so badly that I almost feel like a lot of emotions I felt honestly didn't come out until maybe he was born. In that pregnancy, I was hyper aware of everything. There's a huge difference carrying twins versus a singleton. And with the twins, I could feel things very early on. And the pressure, I have a little 12-pound dog, taking her just on the smallest of walks, the pressure. But then with my son, it didn't feel that way. So now I'm like, okay, I don't feel anything. I'm nowhere near as sick. But I remember it was right before his anatomy scan. I was 19 weeks, and I woke up in the bed, and I was like, I haven't really felt him move. And I had different coping mechanisms when I was pregnant with my son. One of them was the pregnancy stick. I put it in a Ziploc bag and I kept it on my nightstand and I looked at it every day. For whatever reason, that gave me peace of you are actually pregnant and this is actually happening. Another thing is I would try my best to not like that morning that I woke up when I was 19 weeks. Okay, let's see how we can get him moving. Let's drink cold water. I live in an apartment. Let's take the stairs. Let's pace the apartment. What are some foods he doesn't really like? I'm trying not to spiral, but I'm spiraling. And I log in. I work from home. I log in, and where I worked at the time is where I worked when I went through with the twins. So my boss knows me very well. I said, listen, you know what? I think I might go to the ER. I have some concerns. I'm just giving you a heads up. She's like, why did you log in, log off, go to the ER? I was like, you know what? You're absolutely right. My husband leaves work, comes, and everything's fine. It's great. As I got further along, it was very evident, a movement was very evident, but it was so different. And that was terrifying also because I didn't know anything was wrong with the twins. So there was this distrust I had in myself. Um, but to this day, I replay the last week with the twins. And I'm like, okay, on this day, I felt that. Was it that? Okay, and I'm just looking for a time machine essentially to be able to go back and correct the unknown. Um, but because of that, I just felt like with my son, everything. Then he would move too much. I was concerned.
You're so hyper vigilant, right?
So hyper vigilant and something that was disheartening and that was difficult was I went back to McMaster. I went and saw the exact same doctor. I really, really liked her. I felt like I just knew she was never going to dismiss me. Any concerns that I had, right? And something that was hard to hear is sometimes she would be there, sometimes she wouldn't. So I would have someone else. And when I had someone else, because Lincoln was not high risk, like he was the pregnancy that, I feel forever grateful that I got to have after that experience. But when a new doctor or a new physician's assistant is like helping out at that appointment, they'd be like, I read the file. Like, okay. They'd be like, there's no explanation. Like, I was like, I have an idea in my head as to what happened. I don't know if it'll ever be true. We chose not to do an autopsy at the time. It was something I personally just couldn't at the time. And that was hard, like, because the doctor, the physician's assistant would just be like, that must be really hard to not have answers. I have a really great family doctor. I've had him since I was 12 years old, and I refuse to let go of him. He's holistic. He looks at you as a whole. Anyways, he's awesome. So my 6-week checkup with the twin, and so he goes over everything with me. And he's like, I'm gonna say something that, like, might not feel the greatest to hear. He goes, even if we did have an explanation, unfortunately, it doesn't change what happened with your daughters. And I was like hysterical. Um, because it's the unknown, but then I'm also like, if I had known, they're still gone, so I'm still devastated. But I kept the same practices or the same um all I wanted my son Lincoln to know was that even though I was terrified at every step of the way and the closer we got to him arriving, I just wanted him to know that I loved him so much. And I still talk to him the way that I would talk to the girls. I loved binging and watching shows. I would talk to him because I knew he could feel what I was feeling. I believe in that. I really do believe they can feel all of that. And I just wanted him to know it was just because I love him so much. And I love his sister so much. And I just wanted, that was something that I was like, if I ever continue to have more kids, like I will always keep that practice or that of just like talking to them and laying in bed and rubbing the belly and playing the music. And, when they're acting up or they're hiccuping, poking them and joking around with them, that was something that I carried. It was something I had to remember that, when you carry them, all they know is love. That's it. That's all they know. And so that's something that helped me get through the pregnancy with Lincoln. And I had to write my own rules. I didn't have a baby shower. I actually was going to, and just like as you got closer, I just like was like, I love all of you. I can't do it.
You can send the gifts here, but don't expect anything from me.
Like you know what? I had like a very small gathering of like my closest friends, and like I was like, no gifts, and just like lots of food, and I just want to talk. So with the girls, we didn't post on social media. Social media is such a huge part of our life. We didn't post on our social media until the maternity shoot, which was a week before. And so there was just a huge trigger in that. And like I would go back and forth as I got further along. And when I say further along, I would say it was when I got into week 30, 31, where I was like, I still wasn't sure if it was 100% going to happen, but I just felt like, okay, we're at the end of the race. Like, okay, like maybe everything's actually gonna, be okay. With Lincoln. Um, but I couldn't share it. Again, I feel robbed of that experience a little bit. I just couldn't share it on social media throughout my pregnancy. I didn't realize, even when I was pregnant with my son, like there were certain family members that didn't know I was pregnant. Like I really my husband and I, we just handled it differently. I'm also like very, when I'm pregnant, like just want to be in my house. I don't really want to be around people. That's just kind of how I am. And I remember I was around someone and I said, oh, like, I don't know if that's a good thing that like not as many people know that we're pregnant. And someone who I'm really close with, she's like, it's just a different experience. Like it's okay. Like if you two are doing it differently, that's okay.
I see a lot with my clients, like when you're, even with me, like when you're pregnant after loss, you are like at the tipping point, like of how much you can handle, right? Almost the entire pregnancy. And like it just might be that one thing that puts you over the top, right?
Yeah.
And you can't afford to be putting yourself out there like that. And people have different ways of doing it, but it's definitely not uncommon to want to keep it to yourself.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. I think you posted something on social media saying like what was like the most unhinged thing someone said to you after a loss. And I really had to think about it and I was like, wow, I really like isolated myself. Like I think, and when I look back and think about it, it's because when people got the news, they texted me, right? And a lot of the texts I got, and I genuinely believe they meant it in a kind way, and they were just coming from their understanding. But the amount of messages that I got saying you'll be a parent when the time is right, I was just like, I wanted to scream, I am a parent in the worst possible way. And I've actually made decisions that no parent should ever have to make. And I just remember some of the messages that I received. I felt like you don't get it. So I'm not going to respond. And I'm in such a fight or flight response right now that like I could quite literally be very confrontational. So I'm a very extrovert. I'm a very social person, and when that happened, that changed me. Weird. It's more with my living son that people have said stuff that I'm like, oh, and it's been more strangers. So I hate oh, did you have any siblings?
Is here first?
Yes. So when I was pregnant, all of the time, oh, is it your first? And sometimes I would be honest. There was one colleague, we were one on one. She was new to the company. We were getting to know each other. And she's like, oh, is this your first? And for whatever reason that day, I said, actually, no, it's not. I said, unfortunately, I had twin daughters that passed away, and I was very recently pregnant with them. And she looked at me and said, thank you so much for sharing that. I never thought about how asking that question could bring someone so much pain. I was like, okay, she was
Hmm.
the right person.
It's stuff like that that I feel like the world almost gets like healed, like almost moves forward, because so many of the time it just sucks because it's on the griever once again. It's up to us to like educate and to have to expel the very little energy that we have, especially when we're pregnant again. It's like, can I even afford to go there right now? But when we can, and then when we do have those conversations, I feel like they change
Yes,
things. Yeah.
100 with my son. It's a weird thing and a beautiful thing. People call him my twin, and he literally took my whole face. He really did. And he acts like me and has my attitude, so it'll be fun. But I've had strangers who like, don't know me and I'm baby so cute and this and that. And they go, oh, you gotta try for the girl. like, oh, you know, it's like you get that frog, that golf ball in your throat. It's just like, yeah, I had to, but you know, um, so yeah, with my Earthside child, there have been things off the cuff or on the fly that I dealt with that I didn't anticipate because I was so focused on getting him here safely that like right like you just there were certain things I didn't think about until like when you get the birth certificate. When I filled out all the information and I got Lincoln's birth certificate, it says on his birth certificate I've had two stillbirths and one live birth. And I just was like, I didn't know that was a thing. Like I remember it came in the mail and I was emotional about it. It was a mix of emotions of like I appreciate that I guess in a way they're being acknowledged, but I just was not expecting to see that on his birth certificate.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about how his birth experience was for you?
Of course. So I chose to be induced.
How many weeks for you?
I was 38 and 6. His due date was April 8th. And I had a conversation with the doctor like very early on. And I was like, only if it is healthy and only right. I am having massive anxiety about the timeline of this because it wasn't something I thought about. When we were trying, I didn't know, like, you don't know when it's going to happen. And so, what I loved about my doctor is she really let me be in control. Where she's like, if you change your mind and you don't want to be induced, you don't have to be. If you do want to be induced, and if it's safe to do so, okay, we'll do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything was going really well. He was a decent sized baby. I can honestly say now I don't know if I would choose to be induced again. I think I would just let my body tell me. Um, but that process, we went into the hospital to start the induction process. And I had a really, really great nurse. And I sat on the bed, honestly excited until I sat on the bed and they like hooked up the monitor to hear his heartbeat. And I like they took it off and it's like, his heartbeat looks really good and we did like stress tests throughout the pregnancy and all that. Anyway, sit up on the bed and I just started crying. And so she like holds my hand. She's like, talk to me. She's like, I at first I was trying to hold it. My chest, she's like, let it out. Like, please. And I'm like, I'm scared.
Mm-hmm.
I'm scared. I don't know what's going to happen. I have been telling myself this entire pregnancy, don't freak out if he doesn't cry right away like the movies. Don't like panic if like the entire pregnancy, if things go unexpected. I hate surprises now, good or bad. I do not like surprises. So I started, it's a lot. Like, and we were approaching, so this was March 30th. We were approaching the 1 year anniversary. And I was like, I'm a
Mm-hmm.
mess. I am trying to keep it all together to bring this child in the world. I cannot believe it's been a year, you know, since I've said goodbye to my daughters. I am terrified. And so she was like, absolutely. Like all of that, absolutely. And so she's like, we'll just go your pace. And she explained I'm someone that I need to know every detail of everything. So she explained how I was going to be induced and what was going to happen. So I had that like balloon catheter thing. That's awful. I gained a little trust in my body because leading up to that point, I was feeling like sporadic contractions. And I remember my doctor went to check and she's like, you are 1 centimeter. And when she was checking to see how dilated I was, she said, I can do the sweep, I think is what it's called. This is why I love her. And this to me is like, you're a good doctor if you can read body language. So she's like, okay, you're 1 centimeter dilated. She's like, I can do the sweep if you want. And all I did was, she's like, I don't have to do the sweep if you don't want to. It's okay. I'm like, okay, thank you. Like it just I just love that. I don't even know why I didn't want it. I just was like there was something in me that hesitated and she felt that hesitation.
It was your instinct.
It was. Now looking back, I realize in the moment I didn't understand why I did that. But and now knowing more what I know, it wasn't my instinct. I like looking back as we're talking about this, they put in the Foley catheter and then my husband and I went and walked around the master campus and he like we were like cracking jokes and the sun was shining. It was silly, but like I will always cherish that time because like to think like a year prior we were walking into like our darkest moments and didn't know it. And like I remember I was so uncomfortable. I was so oh my goodness, he was so low. Like I was ready to have him, but just like we're walking around the campus, seeing all these young kids living their best lives, and it was like I don't know, it was such a nice moment between him and I before like we brought
Mm.
our son into the world. And then when I had Lincoln, I actually delivered him in the room beside where I delivered the twin. And it was such a full circle moment. And like when we went in the delivery room, they dimmed the lights. My husband had a playlist, and just in terms of like pain management. And I was like, I didn't have an epidural with the twins, but I recognize that this is a very different experience. Jhene was 2 pounds, Raelyn was a pound 10 ounces. I knew Lincoln was going to be more than 7. I recognized that like I might want pain management, but I basically was like, I just kind of want to see how I feel, and then eventually I was like, yep, I need that epidural because they kept checking and I wasn't really progressing, and because I never had an epidural before, when they gave me the epidural, they're like, how do you feel? I was like, oh, like my level was like at a 22 and it like brought it down to a 2, but I was like, I'm not completely frozen. And they're like, pardon? Like, yeah, no, I'm not completely frozen. I can still kind of like feel it over here. And they were like, you are not supposed to be able to feel that. I was like, so they're like moving me around and they're doing like the ice test. I just remember being like, I'm trying to sleep a little bit and enjoy that I'm not in such like intense pain. So like, okay, I if you ask me time, I don't know how much time went by. I have no idea. My husband would know that, but I remember the pain got worse. And then I remember I was like, I'm not frozen at all. And so I was like, the epidural wore off. And so they were like, okay. And as the epidural wore off, I became another human being because the pain was so unbearable and I was not expecting the pain to come back. And when you choose to be induced, there are risks. And one of the risks is that sometimes it can be a stress to the baby. And so Lincoln's heart rate wasn't great as the epidural had worn off. And they were talking about possibly doing an emergency C-section. And I remember I started crying. And they were like, I know it's been like a tough night. And I was like, it's been a tough year. Like, this is
You
too
have no
much.
idea. Yeah.
And so I remember the pain was so excruciating. I had actually said, do the C-section. Like, I don't care because they weren't sure if they could give me another epidural or not. They were like all of these decisions in the air. And in the meantime, I'm like, I am in excruciating pain and I see no end in sight. And so I guess conversations were had and we went with getting another epidural, and the anesthesiologist was very honest. He's like, you fall into the 10% bucket, where he's like, I don't know if it's placement or I don't know if you just can't handle the medicine. Anyways, they gave me the second epidural. It was hell. Um, and it basically switched sides. So what I think it was like my left, I couldn't feel anything, and then when they gave me the second, it was like my right, like it was all, and I was just like, but then because of the medicine and the contractions, I started vomiting. It was a lot. They were moving me around a lot. It was a lot. And the vomiting was starting to get intense, and so they'd given me Gravol. and I could finally go to sleep. And I woke up and they were like, it's time to start pushing. I was like, awesome. Okay, let's start pushing. And then the joke is, as I said, I wear hearing aids. My hearing aids, thanks to technology, they don't have batteries anymore. Like you have to charge them. I've been wearing them all day and all night, and when they tell me to push, my hearing aids died. So
No.
I look at my husband, he's like, well, like, my hearing aids just died. He's like, probably. So I take them out, and so he looks at the doctor and the nurse, and he's like, you're gonna have to like me, and I'll tell her when to push. And so he told me when to push. They were surprised at how good I was at pushing. But yeah, I didn't push for very long. I don't know, 10, 20 minutes. He came out, and he wasn't crying when he came out, and I was like, I don't know. I just kind of was like in a state, and then I heard a loud cry. Um, and then they him over to me, and the first thing I said, I'm not joking, was, "Whoa, he looks like me." He had like all this hair, which made sense. I had so much heartburn, but when I held him, his picture, he was like, he wasn't crying, he wasn't anything. He just like looked at my husband and I like, I'm here.
Mm.
And yeah, it was the it was the best feeling in the world. It was. It was the best feeling in the whole world. Yeah, I didn't want him out of my sight. I didn't want him, But yeah, so I always say to people, it's like I delivered him March 1st, so literally in 12 months I had three babies. Um,
Well,
So yeah, so it was, I had a March 31st, and I always say like we brought him home April 1st, which is the anniversary of when we found out the girls didn't have a heartbeat. So
mm,
coming home with him was difficult, and the physical recovery was more difficult than I thought it was gonna be. But yeah, that was the story of bringing in.
feels feels really prophetic that he would be born in the room next door almost a year exactly. Like that feels yeah, prophetic to me.
Yeah,
How did it was like going through their, first heavenly birthday with him at home with you? How was that experience for you?
very emotional. I remember their actual birthday, my milk came in. Um, And I remember I called my mom. I was like, I need you to come up here. I don't know what I'm doing. And I remember she came, she helped, and then she went home. A lot of tears. We got like cupcakes and we sang them happy birthday. But I remember that day vividly emotionally. It was a lot to fathom and to understand, where it's like if somebody would have told me, hey, this is what this period is going to look like, I would have been like, how do I move through that? Like, that seems I have people say to me all the time, I can't imagine. I'm like, it is unimaginable. Absolutely. My reality. It happened to me and I still don't know how I'm moving through it.
Mhm.
I find for me, like to this day when people who don't know me here, I lost twins of mine passed away and how far along I was. And oh my goodness, people react sometimes very strongly. So yeah, I don't like to say I can't imagine, but the first birthday, yeah, with Lincoln home, it's such a I was so grateful for him and to have this like it was surreal. But, like I was also just like devastated and like how had it already been a year? Time makes no sense when you go through something like that because it feels like yesterday and far away at the same time. So every year we like sing them happy birthday. We talk about them a lot to Lincoln. He definitely knows who they are, no matter where we are. I'm like, oh, say hi to Jhene. We call them JT and Ray Ray. Say hi to JT and Ray Ray. He always like points up to the sky and blows a kiss or like in the apartment, there's certain spaces that he looked, and I'm just like, are they here? Like, are they?
Mm.
When he was a baby, he used to giggle all the time at two corners in his room, and like my husband and I would just be like, okay. So I do know that like they have that bond. I know that for sure. But
Mm.
yeah, I've had to really accept pain and joy, and I've also had to accept like it's okay to be like absolutely devastated. It doesn't mean that you love Lincoln less. It doesn't mean that. It just means that that's devastating. And
Mhm.
um, I remember saying, I see a lot on social media, moms of one, and they're going on to have their second, and they have like this fear and anxiety of like how they're gonna love their second. And for me, it's like the opposite because my first experience was with twins. I know, like, I just have so much love to give and that it just grows with each child. So
Mhm.
it's so interesting how I move with Lincoln because I just like I understand how much of a miracle he is. I understand that like you will never hear me say things with Lincoln like, oh, I can't wait until death because I'm just so happy just to be here and that I get this moment. Or, you'll never hear me say like I wish he's a baby forever. Like people all the time ask me if I miss when he was a baby. And I was like, no, but I also like devoured that time. Like again, was I anxious and was there depression I was working through and anxiety and PTSD? Absolutely. But like those 12 months that I took off work, like that, we went everywhere together. Like I am so thankful for that time that I'm his mom and I get to experience all these things. So it's interesting the perspective that I have now where I'm just so grateful. Uh, there's definitely been times like intrusive thoughts or when motherhood can feel overwhelming. And I remember in the beginning, I would be like, oh my goodness, this is so hard. I was supposed to have two. Like maybe that's why, they died. Like I couldn't handle it. And I have to be like, stop. Like the same way you don't know what you're doing with Lincoln, you wouldn't have known with them and then you would have figured it out. So like
Mhm.
don't let those intrusive thoughts come in. We live in a world where like it's this whole idea of like because you did something, we live in a world like everything has a reason. Like no, everything doesn't. Like there's a lot of unlearning that happens. Everything doesn't happen for a reason. Sometimes it's just absolute garbage and BS. So
Some really horrible things happen with no explanation at all.
yeah. And it's a hard thing to accept, but that's something that I've accepted that that will be a lifelong journey. I'm always gonna have moments where like even Lincoln right now going through daycare and I just have these moments where I just wonder like, like what they would be like and what they would be doing and what they would be into. And I'm just like, I'll always have those moments and that's okay. I'm supposed to. I'm their mom. So I would not be the mom that I am at all if it was not for Jhene and Raelyn. And so that's like heartbreaking to say. But I do mean it. They they taught me so much and it wasn't their job to teach me. And yeah, I do have guilt, I find, with my Earthside child. Just, I don't know. I think there's times where I'm like, am I doing enough to honor them? Am I talking about them enough? Am I, but I'm like, they are a piece of me and I'm a piece of them. And they technically, I believe they are everywhere that I am. So sometimes I just kind of have to walk it back, which is hard.
Yeah, like even when you're not even actively, subjectively honoring them, just in the way that you show up as a mother to Lincoln, and just as the way that you are always thinking about how old they would be, where they are, and are feeling that pain for them, that in itself means they are really showing up in your motherhood every single day, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I say to my husband, one of the things loss makes you feel is just like it gives you this different appreciation for being a mom And being a mom is the hardest job in the world. Like you said, like this is really hard. I'm so grateful, but this is super, super hard. But it also makes me think I can't wait to live the rest of my life with this human, even the hard. Like I'm just grateful for the hard that I get to even have the hard, because that other hard, the having to say goodbye, nothing even touches that. Right.
Mhm. I couldn't have said it better myself. I've had moments, literally when Lincoln was a baby and was teething, and there was just a week where it was bad. And I remember like sleep deprived the whole night, right? I'm like, oh, I remember saying to myself, oh, wow, this is torture. And I was like, this isn't torture. Like, and it just like, because I agree. I would pick this hard a million times over because, yeah, that other path, it's one I wish on no one, but unfortunately it happened. I mean, in the time, in the 3 years, like acquaintances, family members, friends that unfortunately have gone through it. Um, and I think that that's something I spoke about very recently, where I said, when you look at the statistics of loss and infertility, it's either going to directly or indirectly impact you. So it has to be spoken about because, even if you may never go through it yourself, you will come across someone who has. And there needs to be that education um, and awareness because I just think it'll help. I can see that I always say after the twins, I understand how grief can swallow you whole. I understand now how people who have gone through something and their life just takes a totally different direction. If I did not have the privilege, the access to tools that I did, the family, the village, I'm like, that situation could have swallowed me whole, 100%. And I just think that having these conversations that we're having, it helps people not to feel isolated. For me, it was the support group and like hearing somebody else say something. I was like, I feel that way too. Like, okay, I'm not alone in the anger.
Crazy.
Literally, yeah, I could talk about this forever, but yeah, just how different I've become since. And it's been hard for other people. I've lost some friendships and relationships along the way. And that's okay. I am a big believer, and if you cannot support me or don't know how to be there for me in my worst of moments, will not be here for me in my best of moments. But all of that's hard. It's really hard unlearning and relearning and the secondary losses. So, but I think it starts with the conversation for sure and talking about it and bringing awareness to it. So I'm thankful to have this conversation. This is very therapeutic for me.
I'm so glad. And I know that, like you said, sharing our stories, there's so much power to sharing our stories. And, you're not just finding, it's not just therapeutic for you, but I guarantee there's another woman listening to this who's also finding healing in this. So thank you for sharing, and thank you for your contribution to healing the collective. The more we have these conversations, the more we're going to become aware, and the more we're going to be able to support each other, and women aren't going to have to feel alone. So thank you so much for sharing your story and your babies and your heart. You have such a huge heart, and it's so infectious. I feel like, yeah, I feel like a lot of women are going to resonate with hearing the things that you had to share today. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you for having me and thank you for the work that you do. I think I, when I first got to know you, I was just like, she does what for a living? Okay, okay. So she is you're very inspirational, and you also have a very big heart. And so thank you for creating the space that you have because honestly, like for a long time, I was not on social media, but it's pages like your pages that help me get through the dark moments. So thank you. I appreciate it. I'm so happy that we got to have this conversation.
Me too. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to Tyla for being here on the podcast and sharing such a huge piece of her heart and her story with us, her love for Jhene and Raelyn, and her honesty about what it all means to carry grief and hope side by side. It's just such a powerful reminder about how sacred and how heavy this journey can really be. If her story touched you, please consider sharing this episode with someone who might need to hear it too. Until next time, take care of your heart. Your babies are never forgotten, and neither are you. If you enjoyed today's episode and you are looking to feel a little less alone in life after loss, don't forget to hit subscribe so you can continue hearing real, honest stories from mothers who've walked this path too, and to stay up to date with all future episodes of The Rainbow Connection. If you're looking to connect more, Instagram is where I hang out most, so come and join me in a beautiful community of lost moms for PAL-specific birth education, real-life grief talk, and deep solidarity. You can find me at the.doula.life. And don't forget to check out today's show notes for any resources mentioned in this episode, or head to thedoulalife.ca/podcast for more. And remember, you are never alone. I'll see you in the next episode.